Hello and welcome to episode 97 of Things I've Learned from Barry Harris. And today I thought we would kind of stay on our theme of looking at smaller things, but in particular we would talk about D7, because I've been practicing D7 and I realize there is no knowing D7 fully. There's always something else to discover in it. So I'll show you what I mean. One of the exercises that Barry has as practice for D7, for instance, is he'll say, okay, let's play the scale up and down. So I'm playing D7 scale or D Mixolydian scale. Then he says, play that same scale in thirds. Triads. Chords. Everything up and down. So if you do thirds up, you have to do thirds down, triads down, chords down. Then he says sometimes put a half step below. Let's do thirds again. We'll put a half step below the first note. So instead of D, F sharp, you're going to play C sharp, D, F sharp. And you're going to go up the scale like that. Same thing going down. Or you could do the first note again, which is beautiful. Then you do the same thing with the triad. You put a half step below the triad. Same thing. This is pretty coming down with the half step below the highest note of the triad. And then you half step below the chord, and Barry sometimes does it like with a triplet, so he would say 1, like a triplet. Now that's just a couple of things you should know just for D7, and then there's a million other things. But one thing I started looking at for myself, which I discovered I've never practiced, is I took the half step below the triad. So normally I would say, if we started, we said 1, 2, 3, 4. That's starting on a beat. And then it occurred to me to try it on the end and what that sounds like. So listen to what it sounds like on the end. 1, 2, 3, 4. Totally different feel. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Different feel. I've never played it like that before, ever. So I said, let me see if I could challenge myself to come up with phrases using that idea, that concept of the half step below. Because I've done it half step below starting on a beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done things like that where I did the triad from the fifth, a half step below, and I started on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which is pretty, and then I put one half step. But now if I did that same phrase and I started it on the and, what would it sound like? So let's start it on the and. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. That time I added an extra half step, so when I got to the second, that was on the beat, so I used 2 of Barry's descending half steps between the second and tonic and flat 7. So here's the example of the first one again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or one half step. And then I came down the important arpeggio on the flat 7, which is C major. Or I could do it this way, which is starting on the and, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Also pretty. And I have never played those before. Never. So now, okay, I said, okay, I did this thing where I did 2 half steps. So that means every time after I do the triad, I'm going to do 2 half steps, whatever the 2 half steps are. And I'll use Barry's chromatic scale to do those. So we'll say, start from the fifth, we'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So now I'll do a chord up from the sixth. And now the third is the highest note, so I'm just going to do 2 half steps again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'll start on the seventh, flat seventh, and then we'll say, now we get to the 4. Now there's no half step in between 4 and 3, so we have to jump up to 5. So let's say, now we'll do the tonic. Let's see. That's a nice one. I mean, these are all totally different things. The point of me making this video, though, really is that just when you think you know D7 or you're comfortable with a scale, C major scale, whatever, you don't really know it. You don't really know it. Because it's really impossible to really know it. Because there's so many millions of things you could do with a scale to really make it sound beautiful. Even before you put half steps, just ways that you could break up a scale to make it sound wonderful, like Barry's pivots, which are so fantastic. And in case anybody hasn't worked on pivots, what a pivot is let's say we did the chord up from the root, which has 4 notes, D, F sharp, A, C. You're going to hit the D, and now I need F sharp, A, C to be an octave lower. So then I'll do that from every degree. Second, third, and so on, and you keep going like that. So you have to know from every degree. So the way I've been practicing it recently is, no matter what note I'm thinking of in D7, I say, okay, can I pivot from that note? So if I said, let's do it from the 7th, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a pivot from the 7th. If I say 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I don't want to do them in order. So let's say 2nd, let's say 4th. So you have to know right away. The pivots are fantastic. And I thought I really knew pivots, obviously learning them so many years ago and thinking like I really had them in my hand. But you really don't know them unless you can do them just like that, where you call out a degree of the scale and you're able to do them. That's another thing I thought I knew, which I don't really know. And also these little exercises, which are so beautiful. Like we did triad. We did a triad on the beat, and we also did a triad on the end with the half step below. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we did thirds before. So what's nice is we'll do half step below the third, but always on the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1. 2, 1. Those are really beautiful also, something that I don't do often. So you take a thing that you're really comfortable with doing and maybe try to do it on the end of the beat instead of on the beat. And you're going to find, even though it's the same notes, it has a totally different feel to it and causes you to do something else after it, maybe that you've never done before. So the other thing I was thinking about in terms of D7, somebody else brought up something really interesting. In that, D7 has a diminished found on the 3rd, on the 5th, or every dominant has a diminished found on the 3rd, 5th, 7th, and flat 9th. So that's nice. We know this diminished for D7 to G7, or G major, whichever way we want to do it. Start from the 3rd, or from the 5th, or from the flat 7, or from the flat 9. Those are all beautiful. But there's 2 other diminishes. There's F sharp diminished, and let's say G diminished. Now G diminished, as one of my students pointed out, very smart that he pointed this out to me, because I never thought about this. But we have the D7 diminished scale that Barry talks about. And that has a D7 and also an E diminished, which means we can use that E diminished, which happens to be the G diminished. So the way that you would figure it out is, let's see, if we were playing it and we said, so I just used the diminished on the way down. So let's say, has a beautiful sound to it. That's that diminished. That's G diminished. Then you have G sharp diminished, which you could think of as kind of like it's the third of E7, or at least this is the way I think about it. It's the diminished that's found on the third of E7, which kind of takes you back to A minor. And if you want to think about D7 as A minor, that's a nice way to look at it. So now, if we said D7, let's see, 1, 2, 3. That was that G sharp diminished. So let's see. Oh, let's do it from, let's see. Let's see, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Let's see. That's a nice one. That's a nice one. That's using that diminished. So you can even say. Also pretty. So look at that. There's all three diminishes that you can use as part of D7. Somebody pointed that out to me yesterday. It was really interesting. So the end result is we really don't know D7. And if you think about it that way, think about what improvising is. Improvising is soloing over something like this chord moving to this chord. So movement, so D7 moving to G7, or D7 moving to G major, or D7 moving to D flat major, or D7 moving to G minor, or whichever way you want to look at it. That's a movement. But the first thing I think we have to do as improvisers is say, well, what do I have to say on D7 before we even move to someplace else? And if you really ask yourself that, like, well, how much do I really have that I can say on D7 that I feel like can stand on its own? So if somebody takes my solo, or not mine, but yours, meaning your own, a person's solo, and says, okay, here's a D7, let me see what they played on D7, and just clips that out, would they find something of substance? And that's a question you have to keep asking yourself as an improviser, is my solo worth listening to? And I think the only way you can get to the point where you say yes is if you really put in the time to say, I'm really going to develop D7. I'm really going to learn how to play D7 really, really well, as best as I can. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that little video about D7 and how much we have to work on it. Until next time, thanks.